Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use rulers to create um, a rule of thirds or kind of a third template, how to create shapes, in this case rectangles, on different layers, and then how to use the eyedropper tool and paint bucket tool to insert the colours that you have chosen from doing an earlier task, from doing the colour design, selection task, and then quickly put them in. Okay, so let's get going with this. Now, the first thing that you want to do is click on Photoshop. We want to go to File and New. I've chosen 24 centimetres as the size just because it's easy to divide it into thirds, because it's basically the 8 times table. So we want to do 24 by 24 and a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. So let's okay that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to double click on the background and change it into a layer instead. And then I'm going to right click, or you can go up here to this little menu here if you want to, and just duplicate the layer. So at the minute I'm on the paint bucket, so let's go back to the drag tool, the move tool here, and let's get some rulers on. Now you can see when I open this, my rulers are already here on display, but if they're not, go to view and click on rulers, and then you'll see you have rulers down the side. And what you do is you left click on the ruler and drag a ruler and drop it. So I'm dropping it at 80, and I'm clicking on the ruler and dragging at 160, and then I'm doing the same down. So I'm dragging one and leaving it at 80, and another one at 160. And if you're not happy with the division, say you've dropped it slightly in the wrong place, a millimetre or so off, then you can still move it. So you can see my drag tool, as it becomes nearer the line, it turns into this kind of icon, and at that point you can click, left click, and you can drag it and move it. Okay? So the next thing we need to do now is to go and just create the shapes. So now there is this kind of marquee tool here with a kind of dotted line around it, but that's not what you want. You want the solid kind of rectangle here. It may not show that. It may show, I'll click on the little arrows, and it may, when you're looking at it, be an ellipse. So you're going to click on the little arrow and choose the rectangle. Now, at the minute, if you look up here, the fill, that means the colour of it is going to be black, and the stroke and the outline, that's going to be black as well. So for the fill, I'm just going to click on it, and I'm going to choose a very, very light grey just for now. Okay, as you can see, that's gone light grey. In terms of the stroke, if you click on the little arrow next to it, like a sliding scale appears here, and the stroke, the outline can be really big or really small. So I'm going to make mine very small at around about 10 points here. And so what I'm going to do is create the rectangle. You'll see it'll go into that kind of light grey. See where it says rectangle 1? Well, I'm going to double click on the name, the word, and I'm just going to call it vertical left. You don't have to do this. It's just you can't tell sometimes which rectangle is on which layer. Now, if you've only got 4 or 5, you'll probably guess. But if you're working with, 20 layers and you're not naming the layers, then you might start to mix up which layer is which. So I'm going to create now a new rectangle. And I'm going to double click on it. Click at the end, backspace. Horizontal top. So I'm kind of using my rulers as a guideline. What I'm not doing is scattering everything all over the kind of canvas. I'm thinking about where my placement is, and I'm making sure I've got lots of negative space. Okay, it's really important that you do have negative space. So let's call that one medium. And then I have one more. I think what I'll do, I'll just call that one final. So now if you want to, like at the minute, this is too big, I think, so I want to change it. So I'll just go click back on that layer, which is vertical left. And if I go into my drag tool, I can still move it. And if I go to edit, no, sorry, if I go to edit and transform path and scale, I can make it smaller. Now at the minute I can stretch it and make I can transform it any size, but if you like the kind of ratio of it, you just want it smaller, then you've got to make sure that you keep the shift button down. You've got to press the shift button, and then when you make it smaller, you see it can't go out of proportion, it can only go bigger or smaller. So the shift button is really, really important. So I'm letting go of shift, and then I'm moving it back into place. Now I quite like the idea, so you tick that if you're happy with it. Now I quite like the idea of these being on the same line. So if you want to, you can just drop the ruler down temporarily. Can you see it's not quite on the same kind of line? So again, I can move it. And then as soon as I see that icon, I can move it away again. So basically what you're doing is you're using your kind of rule of thirds. So what I've basically done is I've filled in most of the 2/3, and I've left 1/3 of the design quite empty. I mean, it is important that you do have negative space. You can't, the worst thing you can do is have one thing over here, one thing over here, one thing over here. It's not going to work. There's no focal point. So I've kind of crammed, that this is an intersection point, and I've sort of crammed everything. So it's quite busy in this section, but I've balanced it up by leaving this quite empty. Now, when you're happy with your basic composition, what we need to do then is to make this now just one layer. So there's lots of ways of doing it. So if you go to layer, you can flatten it or merge down or merge visibles. So I'm just going to merge down. And then, so those layers, and then actually what I'll do is I'll just merge all the visibles. There you go. So now there is just one layer. You can't move them anymore. Okay, it's all set. And at this point, if you want to, you can get rid of your rulers. So you click on the ruler and drag. And now what we're going to do is we can fill it in with the colours from the sort of colour scheme designer palette that you constructed. Now, you would have gone on there and you would have hopefully done a screen grab of the colour palette that you like. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that into Photoshop. So now it's just on another tab. I'm going to find my eyedropper tool, which is here. I'm going to click on it, click on the colour, which now appears here. Go back into my design, go into my paint bucket, and then paint bucket that original kind of shape in. Onto here. I drop that. And I'm going to make, so back on the paint bucket, I'm going to make that. And that orange. And then you've got to decide as well whether you want a white background or whether you want a colour background. It makes a big difference. Let's get this one filled in first. Try this one, just to see. So it's up to you whether you want to, you want to have a colour background or a white background. I think I probably prefer it white. So that's easy to do. Can you see here? If you've got white here, you can just double click, back on your paint bucket. But if you were to put this design as it was straight onto your sway, because you've got a white square and you'd be putting it onto a white background, you would lose the square completely. So you've got to put a small thin outline onto it. So what you do is you duplicate the layer, so you can go here and duplicate, down to FX, down to stroke. Make sure that says inside. You don't want it to be too thick, so only 1 or 2 pixels. I'm just going to put in 2. And then you will have a thin black outline. It's really important that you do this. And again, you can just flatten the image if you want to, or merge. visibles. Then go back into image size. Change the centimeters, you know what you're doing. 24, it should be alright, but we could probably save it down to maybe 20. Resolution of 300, that's fine, okay. And then file, and save as. Call it something. Decide where you're going to save it. So your Apple Cart, if you have access to an Apple Cart. If you don't, then a folder on the desktop for now. Make sure here you've saved it as a JPEG and save. And that's it. So that's the end of this